The studio lights burned hot, the audience buzzing with anticipation, when the moment exploded without warning. Trump had just finished a boastful monologue, hammering on about how only he had the strength to fix America, when Denzel leaned forward in his chair, his voice calm but slicing like a blade. Strength, he repeated, his eyes narrowing. What you're describing isn't strength. It's control. And that's not leadership, that's dictatorship. The words hit the studio like dynamite. Gasps, murmurs, then a stunned silence rolled across the audience. Trump froze, his trademark smirk twisting into something darker. He leaned closer to the microphone, his finger pointing straight at Denzel. "Don't you ever call me that," he growled, his voice rising. "You think you can sit there, an actor, and label me a dictator? I was President of the United States." Denzel didn't flinch. He kept his gaze locked, letting the silence linger until every person in the room leaned forward. "Exactly," he said, his tone steady. "You were entrusted with power. And instead of lifting the role of president higher, you tried to bend it around yourself. That's what dictators do. They make the office about them instead of the people." The crowd erupted, some clapping, others shouting, and the tension crackled like static. Trump slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming through the speakers. "You don't know what you're talking about. I gave this country jobs, security, respect. Dictators don't build nations, they destroy them." But Denzel cut in before he could finish, his voice sharp, cutting off Trump mid-sentence. "And what did you do to the contractors, to the builders, to the working men who trusted you with their livelihoods? You built towers on their backs, then left them unpaid. That's not leadership. That's exploitation." The audience gasped again, the host tried to calm things down, but the fire was already raging. The stage was no longer a set for a late-night talk show. It had become a battlefield. Trump's face turned a deep shade of red, the kind that made even his supporters in the audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. He jabbed a finger toward Denzel, his voice trembling between fury and desperation. "You sit there and act like you know me, like you know what it takes to lead this country. But you're nothing but Hollywood. You play pretend for a living. You don't understand real power." Denzel leaned back slightly, his expression calm, almost surgical. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. His tone carried the weight of truth. Real power isn't about making people fear you. Real power is about serving people, even when it costs you. But you never paid the cost. You made everyone else pay it for you. The crowd reacted instantly. A section of the audience cheered loudly, while others booed, creating a chaotic clash of voices. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's furious glare, his fists tightening on the table. "That's a lie," he roared. "I sacrificed more than anyone. I was attacked every day, every hour, by the media, by the Democrats, by people like you who never gave me credit for what I accomplished." Denzel didn't let the outburst shake him. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Trump's, cutting through the noise. "What you call sacrifice is actually accountability. And every time someone held you accountable, you called it a witch hunt. That's not sacrifice, that's avoidance. Dictators avoid responsibility. Leaders take it on their shoulders." The tension thickened until it was almost unbearable. Even the host looked lost, unsure whether to intervene or let the storm rage on. The audience sat on the edge of their seats, aware that this wasn't a normal debate, it was history being written live. Trump slammed the desk again, his voice cracking with rage. "You don't get to lecture me, Denzel. I've stood on the world stage, I've met with kings, presidents, generals. You're just an actor." Denzel's reply was sharp, immediate, and devastating. And yet tonight, the actor looks more like a leader than the man who once sat in the Oval Office. The studio shook with gasps and shouts. Trump's jaw dropped, and for the first time, he seemed to hesitate. The silence after Denzel's last words didn't last long. Trump snapped back, his voice booming, trying to regain the upper hand. "Don't you dare compare yourself to me. I built empires, I fought every corrupt system, I gave people jobs, security, hope. You read lines on a set. You don't know a damn thing about running a nation. Denzel shook his head slowly, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He didn't need to shout, his calmness was like a knife slicing through Trump's frenzy. Jobs, he repeated, his tone sharp. You mean the jobs you promised and never delivered? The factories that closed, the farmers who went bankrupt while you staged rallies and bragged about greatness that never came? You built empires, yes, empires for yourself. But the people who trusted you? They were left with dust. The audience erupted again, some clapping, some yelling, as if the studio itself had turned into a courtroom. Trump leaned forward, his hands gripping the desk so tightly his knuckles went white. You're twisting everything. I put America first. I stood up to China, I rebuilt the military, I secured borders. Do you think any of these soft politicians would have had the guts to do what I did? Denzel's eyes narrowed. He let the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering his blow. You put America last every time you put yourself first. Every headline, every deal, every stunt was about you. And when America needed calm, you gave chaos. When America needed unity, you fed division. That's not putting America first, Mr. Trump, that's putting Trump first. Gasps echoed. Even those in the crowd who wore red caps shifted uneasily. Trump's face contorted with anger, but there was a flicker of doubt behind his eyes. The camera zoomed in on the tension, Denzel unmoved, Trump trembling with barely controlled fury. The host finally tried to intervene, his voice shaky. Gentlemen, let's, but he was drowned out by chants from the audience. Some shouted, Denzel, Denzel, while others tried to rally for Trump. Trump slammed the table again. I don't need lectures from an actor who doesn't know sacrifice. And Denzel, without missing a beat, leaned in and dropped his words like thunder, you're right. I don't know your kind of sacrifice. Because I've never sacrificed truth for ego. The studio erupted, and for the first time, Trump looked like he had no script. Trump's face flushed red as the crowd's roar drowned out his attempted rebuttal. His hands twitched, his jaw tightened, and he tried to plaster on the familiar smirk he used at rallies. But Denzel had struck a nerve, and everyone could see it. You think you're some kind of savior? Trump barked, stabbing a finger across the table. The American people chose me because I wasn't afraid to say what needed to be said. Because I told the truth, no matter how ugly it was. You stand there, acting like some moral compass, but where were you when this country was bleeding jobs? Where were you when drugs were pouring across the border? In Hollywood, collecting awards and applause while real Americans suffered. The words hung heavy, but Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly, as if giving Trump space to dig himself deeper. Then he leaned forward again, eyes locked on Trump with razor precision. I was in the same America you claim to defend, he said, voice low but sharp. I was in communities devastated by the policies of politicians like you. I was listening to single mothers working 3 jobs while you bragged about your wealth. I was watching soldiers return broken from wars you cheered on but never bore the cost of. Don't you dare tell me I don't know suffering. The audience's energy shifted, applause thundered, and even those who had been hesitant leaned in closer, captivated. Trump banged the desk again, louder this time, almost desperate to reclaim ground. You're nothing but an actor. Everything you say is scripted, rehearsed. People like you pretend to care, but when the cameras go off, you vanish. I lived it. I fought it. I carried this country on my back. Denzel's reply came like a hammer. Carried it? You dragged it into chaos. Every time you had a choice between truth and self-preservation, you chose yourself. And now you're here, on this stage, still playing the victim, still blaming everyone but yourself. That's not leadership, it's cowardice. The word cowardice cut deeper than anyone expected. Gasps filled the studio, and Trump's shoulders stiffened. He tried to laugh it off, forcing a chuckle, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. You're finished, Denzel, Trump muttered, pointing at him like a warning. Nobody talks to me like that and walks away clean. Denzel didn't move. He just stared, calm as ever, then replied softly, "That's the problem. You think respect is owed, not earned." The host, visibly rattled, turned toward the cameras as the chants from the audience reached a fever pitch. The tension wasn't just in the studio anymore, it was spilling onto millions of screens across America. The studio had turned into an arena. Every clap, every whistle, every gasp bounced off the walls, amplifying the raw tension. The host tried to intervene, but it was too late, the showdown had escaped his control. Trump, red-faced and visibly rattled, pushed his chair back as if standing would give him back his dominance. "You don't get it, Denzel," he shouted, pacing the edge of the stage. "You live in fantasy land. People cheer for you because of movies, not because you know what it means to lead. Leadership is ugly. Leadership is about making the tough calls. You've never had to do that." Denzel slowly rose to his feet, not in anger but with a measured calm that made Trump's movements look erratic. His voice was firm, carrying through the chaos without needing to be raised. Leadership is about sacrifice, not ego. It's about putting the people before yourself. And every single decision you've made, every tax break for your billionaire friends, every insult to the grieving, every deal that padded your own pocket, proves you're not a leader. You're a user. America doesn't need another user, it needs a fighter who knows what pain feels like. The audience erupted, half cheering, half booing, but all on edge, no one looking away. Trump jabbed the air with his hand. "You think you can lecture me about sacrifice? I gave up everything to run this country. I lost billions, to serve the American people." The crowd laughed. A ripple of disbelief spread, and even the cameras caught Denzel raising an eyebrow, unimpressed. He leaned slightly toward his mic. "Lost billions?" he asked, the sarcasm thick. "Or hid them? Because last I checked, half the country still remembers the contractors you stiffed, the universities you scammed, and the charities you drained. That's not sacrifice, Mr. Trump, that's theft dressed up as patriotism." The host's jaw dropped. The audience broke into deafening cheers, some people even rising from their seats. Trump's fist slammed onto the desk so hard the sound echoed like a gavel. "Lies. Fake news. You're repeating garbage from people who hate me because I was stronger than them." But Denzel didn't let up. He took a step closer, closing the gap, his eyes locked on Trump like a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "No, Donald. This isn't about hate. This is about truth. And the truth terrifies you because it strips away the illusion. You built a kingdom on smoke and mirrors, and now, under the lights, everyone sees through it. That's why you snap, that's why you rage, because deep down, you know you're exposed." Trump froze, blinking rapidly as if searching for words that refused to come. For the first time in the entire broadcast, silence from him lasted more than a beat. The crowd seized it, chanting, clapping, screaming. The sound was overwhelming, and the cameras captured it all. And in that silence, with millions watching, Denzel delivered the final blow of the round: the truth doesn't need an army. It just needs one person brave enough to speak it. Tonight, that person is me. The audience exploded. Trump, red with fury, leaned into his mic, trembling with rage. But before he could speak, the host cut to a commercial break. Trump's face flushed crimson, his fist slamming against the desk. "You don't get to call me a dictator. I'm the most freedom-loving leader this country's ever had," he roared, but the crack in his voice betrayed weakness, not strength. Denzel leaned forward, calm yet razor-sharp. "Freedom-loving," he said slowly, letting the words cut through the air. "During your time, the press was silenced, critics were branded as traitors, protesters were beaten down. You didn't give power to the people, you hoarded it for yourself. If that's not dictatorship, then what is? The studio fell heavy with tension. Some in the audience glanced nervously at Trump, while others nodded firmly at Denzel's words. Trump opened his mouth, desperate to claw back control, but the words choked in his throat. Denzel pressed on, his tone steady, devastating. A real leader unites through trust, not fear. But you? You turned Americans against each other. His words echoed through the room, met with a sudden burst of applause. Trump tried to wave off the applause with a smirk, but it looked forced, his jaw tight. You're just another Hollywood actor who thinks reading lines makes you wise, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. The crowd hissed at the jab, sensing the cheap shot. Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Trump like a surgeon about to make the final cut. Hollywood didn't give me this voice, he replied firmly. Life did. Watching my people struggle, watching politicians like you promise salvation but deliver nothing but chaos, that gave me this fire. The audience erupted, some rising to their feet. Trump snapped back, his hands cutting the air. Chaos? I made America strong again. I gave jobs, I rebuilt the military, I brought respect back. His words came out fast, almost desperate, trying to plug the holes Denzel had opened. But Denzel shook his head slowly, letting the silence weigh heavy before speaking again. Respect isn't built on fear and self-service. You think strength is shouting the loudest or threatening your enemies. Real strength is lifting up the weak. And you failed, Donald. Again and again. Gasps and claps filled the studio. Trump's face darkened further, his comeback faltering under the roar of approval. Trump slammed his hand on the desk, the microphone catching the thud. You sit there and act like you're some kind of savior, but you don't know a damn thing about running a country, he barked, his voice trembling with both anger and insecurity. The audience hushed instantly, the tension crackling. Denzel didn't back away. He leaned forward, his tone calm but razor-sharp, slicing through Trump's outburst. Running a country? You mean bankrupting it like your casinos? You mean stiffing workers and walking away with your pockets full? That's not leadership, that's exploitation. The studio erupted, a mix of cheers and gasps, as if Denzel had just pulled the curtain back on something everyone knew but few dared to say out loud. Trump's face reddened, his finger jabbing the air at Denzel. Lies. All lies. You think you can humiliate me here, in front of America? I built this nation stronger than ever. His words stumbled, his usual bravado cracking. Denzel shook his head, his calmness only making Trump look more unhinged. No, Donald, he said, voice steady as stone, you didn't build America. America built itself, despite you. And every time you put yourself above the people, you prove you were never worthy of the office you held. The crowd roared, some chanting Denzel's name, while Trump's lips pressed tight, his fists clenched on the desk, trapped in silence. Trump's silence didn't last long. He forced a smirk, trying to recover his footing. You're an actor, Denzel. You deliver lines someone else writes. I deliver history. That's the difference between us. His supporters in the studio clapped nervously, their applause sounding more like a lifeline than conviction. But Denzel didn't flinch. He rose slightly in his chair, eyes locked on Trump, his voice echoing with conviction. History, he said, pausing for effect. History will remember you, Donald. But not as you imagine. Not as a builder, not as a leader, not as a patriot. History will remember you as the man who tried to turn America into his own brand, and failed. The audience erupted again, chants of "Truth! Truth!" echoing across the studio. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's face, the bravado was gone, replaced with the unmistakable glare of someone cornered. He pounded the table, his voice cracking, I will not be lectured by a Hollywood hypocrite. His words fell flat, drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Denzel leaned back, calm as a storm that had already passed, his closing words slicing through the chaos, America doesn't need a showman. America needs integrity. And that's something you can't buy, can't fake, and can't bully into existence. The studio lights seemed brighter, the tension unbearable, as the entire nation watching knew, this clash wasn't just entertainment. It was a verdict. The final blow came not with shouting, but with silence, the kind that cuts deeper than any insult. The crowd hushed as Denzel stood, towering in presence, his voice calm but searing. "Donald, history will not remember the deals you brag about, or the buildings with your name plastered in gold. It will remember the damage. The division. The way you turned America into a stage for your ego. You call yourself a builder, but what have you built? Nothing that lasts. You've only left cracks, in our economy, in our trust, in our very soul as a nation." Trump tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The cameras zoomed in, the so-called king of confidence looked cornered, stripped of his armor. Denzel leaned closer, his words slicing through the heavy air, "And when my children, and their children, ask what we did when our democracy was at risk, I'll tell them this: I didn't stay quiet. I told the truth. To your face. And tonight, the people heard it too." The audience exploded into applause, a thunderous roar shaking the studio. Some rose to their feet, chanting Denzel's name, while others simply stared at Trump, their faces etched with disbelief. As the credits rolled, the cameras caught one last shot: Denzel, steady and composed, walking away from the desk while Trump slumped back in his chair, defeated not by policy points, but by the undeniable weight of truth. Some debates end with noise. Tonight ended with truth. Denzel didn't just confront Trump, he reminded America that power means nothing without responsibility. And when history replays this night, it won't be Trump's anger people remember, it'll be Denzel's words, clear and unshakable: truth is stronger than pride.